thank everybody for coming and showing their interest in the Chilton School District. Just want to also mention to everybody, remember that this meeting is being videotaped and will be available at a later date. The first item on the agenda is Dr. Martin will provide a short presentation that will detail some modifications to a budget reduction based on some proposed fund balance usage by the board.
Good evening. I too would like to welcome all of you here this evening, and I'm glad to see that we had cause to use the English Center, and the community room would not have been comfortable enough to accommodate this number of people. Since we have started this budget reduction process, I've really sort of framed this as community conversations about how we use our financial resources to support the people in the programs of our school district in order to provide the educational resources to our students. And I know that this can be, while it's been a very public process, it can also be a very painful process in that decisions are made and recommendations are presented that may not be what everyone wants to hear. But I do appreciate your ability to stay with us through this process, with your ability to feel free to voice your opinion through this process, and that really is why we're here this evening. On December 19th at the December board meeting, I presented to the community and to the board about $640,000 worth of budget reductions for the 2012-13 school year. And at that time I indicated that this was a process and it will take us a bit of time until we finalize this come spring for the next school year. But to give you just a little overview of what our intentions and expectations are this evening, I'm going to go through a very short presentation with you, 4 or 5 slides, to show you where we're at in the process today, what new information we have to share with the community. Then we're going to open it up. There's mics down here on either side of the stage for community members to come forth. We ask that when you do, you state your name and your address for the record, and that you speak freely to the Finance Committee. This is ultimately a Finance Committee, but many members of our board are here this evening. We're not going to interrupt your comments. We want you to feel free to come down freely and make them, but myself as well as my administrative team members will be taking notes. And after all the comments appear to have finished, I will get back up again, and any factual information that I can present to answer questions that were posed during the input session or to correct information that was given, I will do so. Then I will turn it back over to Mr. Brickle and see if there's any closing comments from the committee and the board. So with that, let's begin. This is a very short presentation on budget revisions. After looking at the fund balance that the school district has, which is approximately 31%, at a 31% base, the board asked the administration to take a look at, are there some one-time expenditures that we could commit fund balance monies to that would help alleviate some of the stress we're feeling under this current budget deficit of $630,000. And there is a debt out there in Fund 38. This is non-referendum debt, and therefore it is subject to the revenue limits. The cash requirement of this debt is approximately $541,000. This debt is callable in the next school year, and the payoff of this debt over the next 5 years opens up approximately $110,000 to $120,000 of Fund 10, which is our general fund under the revenue limits. By paying this debt off early, the cost savings, the approximate cost savings to the taxpayer will be about $52,000 in interest payments. This would be a one-time use of fund balance monies, which is an appropriate use of fund balance. You've heard me use the expression, you don't go to your bank account to pay for your groceries. You don't go to your fund balance to pay for ongoing costs, or very shortly you won't have any fund balance left. And our fund balance monies are used to finance the district through its payroll and its expenditures throughout the school year in order to avoid short-term borrowing. So this is a very appropriate use of fund balance monies, and it would reduce the fund balance to approximately 24%. We just had our auditor's report at the December board meeting, and according to them, I believe the recommended fund balance is somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 25%, 21 to 25%. So we feel that paying this debt off early offers multiple opportunities for us. Not only does it save some money to the taxpayer, it frees up some money for us under the revenue limit, and it brings the fund balance within the target range as recommended by our accounting firm. So with that, the payment of this debt in the 2012-13 school year would have been approximately $112,000. You may recall that when I gave my presentation on December 19th, the target was $633,000, but I presented $640,000 of reductions. So if I take the debt payment and the overage amount, I have approximately $119,000 with which to bring back some of the earlier reductions recommended on December 19th. And the next page shows you what those recommendations will be. All of these reductions come from the academic program. I am recommending to the board that we bring back, not that this person ever actually went away, in fact she's here this evening and we welcome her and are glad to see her here, but based on the recommended reductions, that we not reduce a 1.0 librarian position and hire a half-time aide. That amount of that reduction as well as addition was $76,000. That we also not reduce 0.5 of a full-time equivalency of a family and consumer education instructor. That we bring back the agricultural extended contract, and that we also bring back approximately half of the original reduction, which was in the neighborhood of $23,000 of the G&T gifted and talented allocation at the elementary school. I don't have that exact allocation calculated, but it's about a quarter of a position that the reduction cut in half. Now I'm bringing that half back again. So as much of that time allocation that we can bring back for that individual for $10,000, I am recommending that we do. So that's my recommendation for the $119,000. Based on that, then, I wanted to update the final page of the presentation that was given to the community on December 19th. So what do these changes now do to that? Again, transfers to the community fund remains unchanged, special education reductions remain unchanged, athletic reductions, and so on. All of those remain unchanged except for the academic program reduction has now been reduced to $22,326. So now, instead of the original target reduction of $633,000, we have a target reduction of $521,693, which is 4.5% of the Fund 10 general fund budget. So those percentages equal what percent that is of the general fund. Any questions on that decision or on these revisions to the original presentation? With that, then I'll be seated and the board will return, and community members can feel free to start coming up. Again, please state your name and address for the board, and you're welcome to provide your comments. Thank you.
Just one thing I want to clarify before that it was clear that use of the fund balance was a recommendation by the Finance Committee. It has not been fully approved by the board yet.
I'm Margaret Richmond, 267 Eastner Drive, Chilton. I'm here tonight as a representative of the Chilton Booster Club, and I am the only voice tonight from that organization. The group would like to make very clear to the faculty, to the board, to the administration, that Chilton Booster Club firmly recognizes that it is the job of the school system to educate our children, and we want you to know that academics do come first. However, our group is an advocacy group for athletics, and it would be a failure on our part to not be here to ask some questions about that piece. So I have 3 areas of concern that I'd like to address. I also want you to know that we recognize that on the old figures it was less than 5%. My math isn't quick enough that I can figure it now, but I know that athletics does represent a small piece of the reduction, so I don't want to take too much of your time here tonight. First of 3 areas I want to talk about is the fees. And so everyone is on the same page here with fees. I did ask some questions ahead of time. This school year was the first time that we've seen a co-curricular fee, and that was $35. That $35 fee covered any clubs as well as athletics. In the new proposal under athletics reductions, there is a $95 fee, possibly looking at $70 if it is paid before a certain time frame. Just so everyone understands, that is separate than the $35 fee. From my understanding is we will remain having a $35 co-curricular fee, which will cover clubs, organizations, forensics, plays, so on. The athletic fee is completely separate. Also, so that everyone knows in the audience, in terms of fees, that a family who qualifies for free lunch, they are exempt from these fees. A family who qualifies for reduced lunch, they receive the fee structure at a 50% discount. As an organization, Chilton Booster Club is looking at ways that we can help with the athletic fees if this becomes an issue for our members, for our parents. First and foremost, we see this, I personally see this, as not necessarily a negative to the Booster Club. I see it as a positive way of bringing in more attention to the group and providing a way and a means for us to increase our membership, our active membership. We are looking at the possibility of providing some kickbacks to our volunteers. For instance, if they work more than 2 or 3 events per year, perhaps we'll provide and start doing a family account within our accounting system and giving $20 or $30, whatever it would be, into a family account, very similar to how the senior trips are run right now. We may possibly be looking at a contingency fund, setting aside a certain amount of dollars per year for families if they need to come to administration to say, would you please, apply to them for money for fees. That's a possibility as well. However, what we're really hoping to do is increase our membership, our active membership, and it's not a huge amount. We're looking at going from our 20 very active members to having 50. Those extra people, I'm looking at maybe working about 5 hours per year. And I think the fee structure, hopefully we can help with that by drawing more people in if we're allowing some kickbacks. But what we want in turn, and what we'll be looking at in turn, and I would like to work with the administration and Dave Snodden about how the school can help us with membership and active membership. I fully understand that a school cannot make any parent be a part of a club or organization. We understand that the school cannot make a parent volunteer. However, I do believe we have some ideas where I think the school could help us to influence other people to be involved. The Booster Club will also be looking at having a 0 membership fee, because right now we do have a fee. So we need to respond to the needs today. So that will also be discussed. Second area is golf. The Chilton Booster Club is committed to supporting all middle school and high school sports, and we really do not want to see the elimination of any sport. I had a question, the first question that our group had wanted is how was golf targeted? I don't see Mr. Snodden here to respond. Oh, he is. Do we want him to respond to that now, or do we do that later? So we had a question about how was golf targeted. With the permission of the Nelsons, I would like to deliver this message as well. First off, Mary and Joe Nelson, owners of Hickory Hills Golf Club, are very great supporters of our golf team. They don't charge fees for our student athletes and numerous other incentives that they provide them. They also shut down their golf course for cross country. They lose income because of that. We appreciate all that they have done for the school. They are very concerned about the loss of the golf team. Mentoring the young is good business for them, bringing to the future. They have stated that if the golf program is eliminated, they would not allow the cross-country team to run that home meet. Chilton Booster Club had gotten together on Sunday evening to look at ideas of ways that we could help financially. There are two individuals, Wayne Brandt, a parent here in the school system, as well as Darren Wolfel, who is a superintendent of Hickory Hills Golf Course, that are willing to be volunteer coaches for this sport, which represents more than half of that budget for that sport. The Nelsons are also willing to provide supplies, which is indicated as $500. We have a question about what $245 in benefits are. I have no idea what that means. Transportation. If you look at what was actually used last year, it was $235. What's budgeted for this year is $1,556, a tremendous jump. Whether those are actually needed is up for question. But would like to let you know, again, volunteer coaches and the $500 from the Nelsons is a commitment already. Last area I'd like to address is a way that we can help relieve some of the costs that are already happening in the school, and that is event workers. Event workers are the ticket takers, perhaps the scoreboard people, announcers, that type of a person at an athletic event. I have a figure of 14,000 some here, 14,845 cost per year. I'm not sure if that actually includes referees. I don't think it does. I think this is just specifically event workers. Mr. Snobben would have to answer that. I understand that it's in the teacher contract for them to voluntarily sign up and be paid to be an event worker. However, June 30th, collective bargaining rights will end, and therefore there's an opportunity for this to be opened up for the Chilton Booster Club to take on those positions. And we would like the board to know that we are willing to be event workers. At this point in time, though, I want to make it clear that with our active membership as is, I am not comfortable telling you that we can do 100%. We would be looking at a percentage, perhaps a particular sport, perhaps a particular type of position, I don't know. It is my hope to stand up here next year at this time and tell you we are ready to take 100% of those positions. But that is all based on improving our active membership. Again, an area that I hope that we can have more of a collaborative working relationship together. I'd like to close with, once again, we do believe academics are first, and thank you so much for your time.
Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Amy Thielman. Address is W3920 Moore Road, Hilbert. On behalf of the FFA students, the agriculture students, the FFA alumni, and myself as the ag instructor, I would like to thank the Finance Committee for reconsidering and proposing a callback of the extended contract cut. I would also like to leave the board with a list of the activities that are covered underneath that extended contract. And if you have further questions regarding it, you could talk with me at a later time. Thank you.
N5353 countywide Chilton. I'd like to speak on the Director of Curriculum and Instruction reduction, $118,377. You look at that as being a complete reduction, but you don't have added in what it's going to cost to have to supplement the job positions or the jobs that were done during that in that type of, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it correctly. All the different jobs that Dr. Blink did, you have to add back in some of the jobs that have to be covered by outside sources or whatever other costs are involved. I'd like to know how you're going to do that and how much it'll be.
Good evening, Carrie Sobel, N1483 South Tower Road in Chilton. The question that I would like to ask this evening is, we've talked a lot about the administrative costs and the administrative contracts that there are. I know with the one administrative proposed cut, there were some issues with paying out that contract, for lack of a more professional way to put that. My concern is down the road, we know that once we get through this year, we still have other years that we will have cuts in front of us. And the concern is, as we work very hard to keep those cuts directly away from the students as much as possible, how do we then secure that we are not dipping into that same fund again to pay out potentially another 2-year contract for an administrator? And I guess I would just suggest or ask the question, are those something that have to be done on a 2- or 3-year contract, and could that potentially be done on a year-by-year basis? Thank you.
My name's Jim Hitz, 105 East Brooklyn Street in Chilton. I have a question about the transfers to the community fund, particularly the 7th and 8th grade sports and the utilities. I was doing some research on the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, of what items that they recommend or don't recommend going to the Fund 80. And 2 of the items that were listed that they find not appropriate were extracurricular activities that were for K through 12 pupils, and then also examples were custodial services, security services, and utility costs. I was just curious as to what the reasoning as far as those items that were chosen, even though the DPI does not recommend those items to be put in Fund 80.
Anybody else?
Karen Van Offen, W3330, US Highway 151 here in Chilton. I'm presenting my questions this evening as a community member, even though I am a staff member here as well. Similar to one of the previous questions asked, I was wondering if there was a particular reason why it was decided that just one administrative contract should be non-renewed versus looking at all of them. From a community standpoint, I would think the district would have much more flexibility from a fiscal standpoint if that was open to all the positions, to be able to look, to be able to move the type of functions around. I did have some questions, again, kind of has been asked, some questions as to really what are the final figures with the savings of eliminating the curriculum and instruction position, when it has been noted that potentially 2 other positions are going to have to be brought back in to cover part of that position. I would just, and I also wondered with that, having some sense, not in great detail, but having some sense of the community feelings as far as requesting to reduce administration, if as much as someone being hired back in to do some of Dr. Blink's functions, we're not looking at another administrator per se, doesn't it look from a community standpoint, the fact that yes, we took out one administrative position, but we've now opened the door for 2 others that, again, won't necessarily be as high a level, but we're still bumping back administrative costs. Finally, the only other point that, well, 2 points. One other point I wanted to make was just, I was very surprised, somewhat taken aback from the fact that when we came to the December board meeting, the sentiment of the meeting was the fact that we would have our reductions proposed at the December meeting, and then we would have this listening session. I was somewhat taken aback by the fact that the one contract that we did non-renew, the district chose to non-renew, that was done before this session, before the input was given from the community. And so it was just something that surprised me quite a bit. Switching hands from community member to the teacher. I do have some concerns with the position of the curriculum and instruction administrative position being eliminated. At this point, we've got several large initiatives that we're starting to unfold within the district between state standards and the response to intervention initiative. State testing, we know, is going to be changing down the road. And I have some concerns with losing the position that basically is kind of the umbrella over all of those tasks. I know that we have very capable administrators that could take on some of those other positions. However, I have concerns with divvying them up and possibly losing the continuity that the Director of Curriculum and Instruction position provides when it comes to putting those different positions in place. So, thank you.
William L. Van Offred, West 3330 US Highway 151. Coming out of the business world, I question why is the administration in your contract at all? Unless you were unionized, there was no contracts. So I really question the need for them in this day and age. Second, I know the district is hoping to go to the referendum in the near future. I feel with 1,200 students in our school district, they will have a difficult time with a referendum with 3 principals and a superintendent. Third, also at the December meeting, I felt I was misled, and I'm very disappointed in that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
of my administrative team members to help me respond to some of the comments that you brought forth tonight. Let's start in order with Mrs. Richmond. I want you to know how appreciative the district is and has been of the support of the Chilton Booster Club, an organization that has worked very hard to support our efforts in the school district. I appreciate your comments about the academic program being first. I truly do. And I think that's probably appreciated by the staff members that are here this evening as well. You bring up a number of points that I think provide good clarification, not only for us administratively, the board, but also for community members. You are right that 2 years ago, I think it's been now, we initiated a $35 co-curricular fee, which at the time was very difficult, I think, for the community. At this forum, there were a lot of questions about that fee, and in general, people were not happy to go from paying nothing to paying something. That fee was instituted for all students based on any co-curricular activity that they had participated in, whether it was forensics or whether they played 3 sports. It was a $35 flat fee. If we had students that did not participate in any co-curricular activity, that fee was refunded back to them through their lunch account at the end of the year. The proposal that was put forth in December was recommended that the $35 fee, and I don't think I was very clear on that in December, so I apologize and I thank you for the opportunity to clarify this evening. The intent is that the $35 fee will stay in place for those co-curricular activities that are not athletic. So if you participate in the play, if you participate in forensics, in any of the club activities, that fee would be $35. But the minute that a student decides they're going to join athletic activities, then that fee goes to $70 if the fee is paid by the 31st of July. If it is not paid by that date, then the fee goes to $95. That is what is in the proposal. And you are correct that students will use the free and reduced lunch status. For those students that qualify for free lunch, those fees are waived. For those students that qualify for reduced lunch status, those fees would be cut in half. I can appreciate your need to work on membership in the CBC because I come to a lot of the events here in the evening and I do see the same familiar faces about helping with events. And I will assure you that the school district will work with you to the greatest extent possible to create an even stronger partnership in helping to support your organization as you support the school district. Because the funds that you are able to take off our shoulders, if you will, provides more relief for us to move to the academic program. So we appreciate that. Did I answer that section clearly? Golf. Mr. Sanabin is here, and that is a very good question. I did not provide the rationale for why that sport was chosen, but Mr. Sanabin is here, and I would ask him, we have a microphone down here on the floor, a hand mic. Mr. Sanabin, if you would come forward and give your explanation for the decision on why golf was the chosen sport. Whatever you feel is appropriate, how you'd like to address that question.
When you take in account what's going on with athletics and the amount of reductions that we need to take, when I looked at the administrative cuts on the board, when I joined them for a meeting, that was on their board also. I can give you my 2 cents worth on golf. Over the 19 years I've been here, we've added one program, and that's softball. And kind of the guiding rule for that was Title IX. That is a rule that requires us to provide equal opportunity for men and women. I think you're all aware of that. To the fact that that has been the guiding decisions that I've mentioned to some Booster Club initiatives that they need to keep in mind as well. Simple point, they want to donate towels to the boys so that when they came off the court, they had a towel to wipe themselves, so it wasn't a community towel going down the bench to wipe sweat. That makes sense. But I informed them that they couldn't give them just to the boys. we had to give it to the girls, which they did. How does this tie into budget reduction process? There has to be some lens or some mechanism that we use to target an ability to reduce the cost that we have. In 1993 to 2012, we've reduced a significant amount of students. We still carry 16 varsity sports. In the late 90s, we had over 500 enrollment, slightly over 500 enrollment. This year, our third Friday count was 364. You'd be amazed at the amount of staff people that didn't even know our enrollment had dipped to that level. Yet we still continue to offer the same number of programs. We have co-op swimming and have been successful at doing that for a number of years to continue to provide that opportunity and also reduce cost to the school in a shared cost with other schools that we co-op with for boys and girls swimming. As we look at the 16 sport offerings that we have 2 sports, wrestling and golf, that do not match up with another opposite gender alternative, whether it be same season, like basketball, or opposite season, like swimming or tennis, where one is in the spring and one is in the summer. One is in the fall and one is in the spring. So when you look at those 2 offerings, is you take the personalities, the coaches, the kids, and you look at what does the school have invested in terms of infrastructure. We have a significant amount of capital investment in wrestling equipment and wrestling mats. Those of you that have kids in that program or come here to our events know that we have mats here at the high school to practice on. We have our old high school mats at the middle school for our middle school and youth kids to practice on. So we have a significantly larger capital investment in the wrestling program just by its nature. So if we looked at, let's eliminate the wrestling program, the normal question that I would ask myself, and I would expect to be asked of me is, what are you going to do with all those mats? I think that's a valid question. Those types of questions are things that I wrestle with. So that left golf. Doesn't mean that I dislike golf. Those of you that know me, I didn't want a fee. Came from a school that doesn't have a fee. And that's a tough thing to swallow. These aren't easy decisions. It's not personal. The family that runs the golf course has been extremely generous to many of us here, directly and indirectly. This is not a personal decision against the Nelson family or anybody else associated with the golf course. They have been generous in so many ways that have allowed us to fundraise for the monies that have been given back to the school, or they themselves have personally donated money, whether it's been the scoreboard situation at the track, or other things that have allowed us to be successful in our athletic programs. But being asked to have ideas in my head, to come to a meeting that addresses budget reductions, I have to use some lens and some mechanism to make that decision. As painful as those decisions are, just as it was for this group of administrators to make those decisions when it came to employees in their buildings. I don't want to look at the Nelson family or the kids in the golf program and say, it's gone tomorrow. That doesn't make me feel good inside. But that Title IX mechanism is the one that, as a public institution, we have to adhere to. Safety, obviously, and some other lens, Title IX. It just makes sense. If there's some other thoughts out there on how to look at evaluating what needs to stay and what needs to go, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. But keep in mind, if you would eliminate a swim program or a tennis program, it's not just one, you gotta take them both. And therefore you're doubling the amount of students you're affecting. So that's the lens or the mechanism that I used as I evaluated what we had in terms of sport offerings and also the amount of students that we continue to have in our high school versus what we had 15 and 19 years ago when I started in 1993. Questions? You want more on that? I can address the golf transportation thing too, as long as I'm here. Those of you remember last spring, it was a challenge to do anything in Wisconsin. Track lost 3 meets. I don't know, Mrs. Lau, but I would guess that our transportation last spring was down in general because we didn't have a chance to play all the things that were on our schedule. Also, in terms of golf, remember, I'm budgeting for a sport that hasn't even started yet, okay? So my guess is my spring budget projections are more cautious because I may not know what invite our coach may want to travel to next year. For example, softball went way down to Baraboo or someplace for a softball tournament. Just giving you an example. So it's a little bit harder at times to predict, 14 months out what may be happening in the spring of 2013. Mr. Hartman, based on the number of golfers that may be going to that meet, oftentimes will take the school van. For every meet, I think it's prudent for me to budget for a bus. So if we take a school van, we've eliminated a significant cost because it's hard for a bus to leave our lot for an event for under $100. The per hourly fee and the hourly fee per driver, that's just a kind of an even number, but we would be getting off on a bargain if we could do a trip for $100, okay? So those are the types of things versus the budgeted versus actual. So the farther we go out, I'm more accurate in the fall and the winter. Spring's a little bit sketchy just by the nature of the distance we're away from the budget process. The last spring was really challenging. Again, we lost 3 track meets. We didn't play all of our baseball, softball games. I don't recall if we got all the golf and tennis matches in, but we didn't in other sports, so I could see maybe we didn't. Or maybe we hosted something we're supposed to travel to. As you know, those things happen in the spring season as well. But those are examples of what impacted last spring and what I do for bus for all of our spring sports. And if we take a van, then we don't have the transportation cost as high for that particular event. So it can be a drastic difference. I shared that with Dr. Martin also.
How many kids can be on the golf team and how many kids on average, best guess?
We have the cooperation with the Nelson family. On our golf team, we have 4 foursomes. They donate all that free golf in half forever. It got to a point though that we had just too many kids impacting their course. And so we came up with the 16 number 10 years ago already. It's been quite a while. That really isn't important, but we used to have too many, and it just became a cluster for their course with the amount of kids that we had in our program. And we hoped they weren't just taking advantage of the free golf, but were actually getting the benefit of being on the golf team. So we have 4 foursomes that we have on the golf team. That's as many as that we keep. If we have more than that, they'll try out, but Dan will only keep 4 foursomes.
I don't think we ever had a limit. As far as the amount of golfers.
We've just set it at 4 foursomes, just that's as many as we can. Right, and we're just trying to be courteous to your course. Dan just said to me that at some point there's just, how do you keep track of 30 kids on a golf course? And that makes sense. And at some points we had numbers in the 20s, near 30, which just became too high. Yeah.
Several years ago, we had like 25 kids that came up, and Mr. Harvey came to us and he wanted to start cutting, and we said we will not cut.
Sure.
Just so that everybody knows that we're not putting any kind of limit out there.
No, and I think I've tried to say a couple times, we're trying to be courteous to their business because of how much they pay back to us. I mean, we're using their course. They get us equipment at a discount. So as much as we can pay that forward by being respectful to the business we want to do.
Could you just make it a little clearer for me about the Title IX? Are you actually feeling pressure that we have got to choose between 2 boys' sports?
No, I made clear to the administrative team that I get a publication called Athletic Business. And the start of the school year, the first few pages were filled with legal reports. These reports aren't filed by Sally Smith's parents who are feeling deprived of her opportunities at schools, but it's advocacy groups that are filing state by state or region of the country by region of the country. They're targeting 2 areas now, and that is the Pacific Northwest, Seattle and Oregon, and kind of the Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania and Ohio, where they'll just send out hundreds of OCR complaints to schools so that they can jump through the hoops to verify their OCR, what their OCR status looks like. And so I just, mentioned that to them, that it's just ironic that as I was trying to use some mechanism to evaluate where we were at, what's going to have the least impact of kids, and those kinds of things, that it was in congruency with some of the legal issues that are affecting different parts of our country.
Can I comment?
Sure.
I also want to comment that Martha and I were on the boys' volleyball team when we were in high school, so I don't think it was just a boys' sport. And we also had a kid that was mentally handicapped
Right.
on our team last year, and I think everybody should be well aware of that also.
Right. If you're not aware as an attendee tonight, in a WI sanctioned sport, a girl has an opportunity to participate on a boys' program if it's not offered for them, but a boy can never participate on a girls' program. So what that's saying is that a girl can participate on the golf team or the wrestling team because they don't have one offered for them, but a boy can never participate on the volleyball team.
Back to the golf, I wish they had golf years ago when I was in school. Because it's something you can use all your life. And if these kids that are playing the sport, when they graduate, they can show their buddies what they're doing wrong, and it helps the whole works. It's all been wrong. Dan Hartman's done a good job with the team, I won't deny that. But now, if we get 2 volunteers to do this job, look at the money we would save. And I don't know if you know the 2 that they mentioned. They are tremendous golfers. And they would do nothing but help the golf team. They wouldn't hurt us, that's for sure, because they're terrific golfers.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate your comments. I've been asked to kind of just let you know what my thoughts were. How do you get there? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's a hard decision. It's painstaking when you're looking at, what part do you want to eliminate? And I'm just telling you that that's the mechanism I used. Again, because if you take out something else, you need to take out both genders. And again, that impacts twice the number of students.
But aren't you taking out both genders now, because boys and girls both can do it?
We don't have the participation from the girls' gender. Let me just answer, and I'll be honest. We don't have the participation in the girls participating in the boys' sport. And it may be because there are 2 other opportunities in the spring where, we've got JV and varsity softball, so those, numbers can be in the 20s to 30. We also have track, and those numbers are typically in the 30s-ish, and many of you know that. So we have 2 other female sport offerings in that season where participation is strong. If I say we have to take out 2 sports, let's say take out tennis or swimming, whatever the number is, you would be taking out more of the opposite gender than what participate in golf. And that's just the fact right now.
In swimming, do we have to rely on other schools for both boys and girls?
We co-op and have for many years, yes. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody anymore. We have since I've been here.
I guess I want to say something on Martha Wolfhall. And looking over the budget, you're raising $340,000 in teachers' salaries, and the economy is not very good. And you can't have a golf team? Hello. And then another thing, I have an issue with Dr. Shea would become the superintendent / principal, and we keep Becky Blank. So we don't have to start so much her, and then we would eliminate Dr. Claire Martin, since she's the last one hired, save a lot of money there.
I don't think that's for me.
Dave, one question. Do you have an anticipated membership number of potential golfers this year?
Our golf sign-up was low. I don't know exactly what the number is, but I can get it for you, Mr. Greco. I just know that it has been a bit of a struggle, but that's not unusual with spring sports when registration typically occurs with the end of January when we read it this year in February, but typically it occurs at the end of January. And again, you're asking kids to think about, especially kids who are maybe on the fence, what do I want to do 15 months from now? So it's not uncommon, again, for our spring registrations, except for your core kids who always know what they're doing, but I'll get that number for you.
Can you give us a little history too? The last few years?
Right. This has been no different than the initial sign-up has been a bit sketchy, but by the time the actual season rolls around, as the Nelsons have mentioned, we always do have enough students to participate. That the lack of participation, by the time we actually get the start of our season, whenever that is based on Wisconsin weather, hasn't been a factor in terms of getting our junior varsity and varsity kids to compete meets.
I think we've gotten some proposals and some offers here tonight that the board will have to research with the administration. So we'll keep researching this and try to work together to resolve this issue. So I'd like to move on if possible.
I think there was one additional question that they had about finances for golf, and that was what the benefits.
Yes, the benefits are Mrs. Lum, Social Security, paid on salary.
Any portion of what, I know in the past I've emailed you kind of the cover pages, those of you that have asked for it, that benefit portion is the FICA portion of the salary.
So if it was volunteers for that.
And while we're very appreciative of the donation the Nelsons are talking about regarding supplies and this approach of volunteer coaches, we have a coach currently in place that we would need to sit down and have a conversation with and really explore those avenues with all those individuals and be respectful in that process, as I'm sure you would expect us to be. And Martha, you are very welcome to share your perspective. That's why we're here this evening. So thank you for your comments. I think that should address everything about golf. Then you mentioned about event workers and opening this up to the Chilton Booster Club. You are accurate that the collective bargaining agreement that we have in place with our teaching staff expires on June 30th of this year, thereby opening up the possibility that those events would not need to be necessarily given first priority to paid staff members. Dr. Shade and Mr. Snobben and I talked very briefly about this possibility and feel strongly that in supervisory positions we still would like staff members to be there because they know the students best. And I see your heads nodding, so I think you would agree with that. But I think we have opportunities here that we can certainly talk about. Again, you're talking about improving your active membership, and so we may have to step into this slowly so that it's not a wish and a by gosh that volunteers are going to come to these events, because they do need to be staffed appropriately. But we can certainly explore what you are capable of and maybe grow from there. So we're open, very open to that. Mrs. Thielman, thank you for your comments. I'm glad that you are appreciative. This is not an easy decision to make any of these cuts. And while I can appreciate Martha's comments, we can't afford a $6,000 golf program. I felt similarly about a $1,600 egg extended contract. But you can see that with the magnitude of the cuts that we have in place in front of us, over $600,000 this year, and we're not new at this. We have been at this for a while and have cut $1 million to date so far. You know where this is heading. And so it's starting to get down to those kinds of decisions, and I'm glad too that we were able to bring that back. Mrs. Hintz, your comments regarding the curriculum position and the Van Offrens that followed are relatively similar, so I'll try to address all of those as accurately as I can. And let me say that I am appreciative of your comments in regard to this position, because it is, we are after all an educational institution, and it does seem a bit of an oxymoron that we are eliminating a curriculum director, and one that has given good service for 17 years. So I appreciate your position in standing up for that and want you to know that. You are correct that this would not likely be a complete reduction. I was not trying to be misleading in the December 19th meeting. I thought I made that clear that there would have to be some costs added back, but I will be equally as honest with you this evening in telling you that we have not explored what exactly that will be. I can tell you that with the use of district fund balance monies to support that program for next year, there will be no additional cost needed for next year. because the total contract amount is supported through fund balance monies. So the decision about what gets added back and what those costs might be are really costs that we're looking at for the 13-14 school year. And while I'm not trying to dodge that bullet, I am trying to balance the 12-13 budget now, so one budget at a time. But it is a consideration that we have to keep in mind. Mrs. Sabo, your comments, I think, were similar, and so we'll kind of stay on this topic, and then if you have questions. You asked about administrative costs and salaries. Since the board, let's start back a ways back. Since I came here as superintendent, and this is my 5th year, I knew that this community was sensitive to the administrative amount of personnel we have here. I knew that from the day I interviewed, because there was certainly an presence about hiring a superintendent that had business background, much like Dr. Master had, to fulfill both roles. I was very clear when I interviewed that those were not my skills, and if that was the intent of the board and the community, they should not hire me as their candidate. I want you to know I was very open and honest about that. But nevertheless, that has been a concern at least for 5 years. And the administrative team has known that. And we have talked about that extensively through the years. A couple of years ago, in order to help us as an administrative team, we had a consultant come and work with us for a number of days in team building capacity. And this was a concern of the group. And when the consultant left, she said, you need, as an administrative team, to address this and start coming up with some scenarios as to how you're going to deal with this, because this is an eventuality that's going to come to bear in this community. So I have documentation. We did follow through on that assignment. Mrs. Lau and I sat down and actually, put pencil to paper. That was back in 2010. And we based it on attrition. As an administrative team, we talked about if one of us would leave, if one of us would get another position, if one of us would retire, resign, whatever, what might we do? How might we fill in the gaps? Because we knew that with any attrition in the district, we're looking to see how we can use our resources more efficiently and not hire back. So since that time, there has been ongoing conversation on that topic. And we did talk, Martha brought up the idea of looking at seniority-based reductions administratively. We did talk about that. We're now at a stage, though, that seniority is no longer going to carry the day in teaching contracts. It would seem a bit two-sided of us, two-faced of us to say, well, teachers, we're not going to decide your attrition by seniority, but we're going to decide ours that way. So we felt that we needed to address it by position. And not, again, an easy decision. When I was here a month ago, I said, which arm do you want to cut off, my right or my left? Do you want it to be a principal position, or do you want it to be a curriculum director position? Because those seem to be the two positions that I hear the most about in terms of reductions in the district. I have recommended to the board the administrative position, and they did approve that in closed session the night of December 19th, following the recommendations that were given. But let me back you up a bit. Since contracts were signed last spring by the board for the administrative team, that was a very uncertain time in the state when Governor Walker had just taken office. School districts around us were non-renewing all their teachers. You may recall that time period. And the board questioned, are we ready to sign these contracts for this entire team? And we looked at each other and we realized we didn't have a good plan, and we weren't ready to make a snap decision at that time. So the contracts were signed. But since then, the Finance Committee, I would say since this fall, has had ongoing conversations. The conversations have now moved from us and as an administrative team to us and an administrative team and the Finance Committee of the board. They have been ongoing since fall. They have been mentioned on our Finance Committee agendas. There have been closed session discussions because there's so few of us that when you're talking about specific positions, you're talking about specific people. And administrators were invited to all those meetings, as well as invited to stay for the closed session portions of their meetings and talk about what is the best way to go about this. We were also advised to bring forth a variety of administrative reduction scenarios. We went through every position. We created multiple scenarios of losing a superintendent, losing a business manager, losing a principal, losing a curriculum director. I can tell you that there are advantages and disadvantages to every single one of those plans. And I can't say that, I can say that there's a possibility that this district is not done in reducing its administrative team. The board has moved now to make a recommendation and to non-renew one contract. That contract, though, does remain in force until the 2013 school year, until June of 2013. So the notice that the board voted on Monday night, December 19th, is a preliminary notice of non-renewal that has to be given to the administrator that holds that contract by the 31st of January of this month. So the board decided to take that action on December 19th in order to give that individual the most time possible to know with certainty that that is the position that has been acted upon by the board and giving them that opportunity to start looking. Could they have waited until their January 23rd board meeting and met their January 31st board meeting to give, or January 31st deadline, excuse me, to give the preliminary notice of non-renewal? Yes, they could have. They chose not to. It has always been the position of the board that we're going to give our employees as much notice and time as possible. If we know that that's the direction we're heading in, we're not going to stall the process. So if you take issue with that, that is a decision that you will have to explore further with the board. But there are timelines that are in place here that have to be adhered to by state law. And that timeline for the preliminary notice is January 31st. So that means it's a preliminary notice. It is not a final notice of non-renewal. It's possible, as I mentioned in December, that we could lose an administrator within the upcoming year, and we would reshuffle our deck accordingly. At that next January, we'll have to give a final notice of non-renewal if in fact that appears to be the case, for that position to expire on June 30 of 2013. So I hope that gives you some indication of the timeline that the board needs to follow. The board was given the option in those discussions to change administrative contracts and to use, instead of non-renewal language, to use layoff language. And the administrative team as a whole in that closed session discussion requested the board to not use layoff language, to not change the contracts, to use the non-renewal process. They were very united in that request. All 5 of them requested that of the board. And their comments, I believe, and they're here tonight, they can correct me if I'm wrong, were we have to plan a year or more in advance as we run the school district. We respectfully request that you plan as well. And if you are going to non-renew our contracts, then you use the state statute approved non-renewal process. So that is why they continue to use the non-renewal process. There was a gentleman here, I think Mr. Van Offeren, you maybe not. Someone asked about the purpose of contracts, why we need to have these people under contract. State statute also indicates that for district administrators, principals, and business managers, there must be a contract in writing. The law appears to be a bit unclear for personnel managers and curriculum directors as to whether or not a contract is required for them. I'm referring to state statute 118.24, which directs how administrative contracts for educators are to be implemented and the timelines that boards need to adhere to. So, yes, 118.24 is the Wisconsin statute. I have it here with me this evening. I can give you a copy if you would like. So yes, some contracts have to be in writing and presented to the board, but again, it appears personnel managers and curriculum directors, it's a little unclear. Although I would tell you that from my experience, having been an administrator in the state of Wisconsin for now going on 15 years, most curriculum directors that I know work under an administrative contract. But the board was given the option to non-renew all the administrative contracts. I did, there was constant conversation going back and forth, not only with the finance committee of the board, the administrators were involved. This was very open conversations, and as well as me referring back to the school attorney, so that we were following state statutes and legal guidelines. And he did recommend that. And I did bring that to the finance committee of the board. And they chose not to do that. And their rationale for that was, we as a school district did not non-renew all of our teachers last winter when districts around us were. Why would we treat our administrative personnel any different than we would treat our teaching personnel? So that again is a board decision. Is there anything I have left out regarding administrative contracts, Dr. Blink's contract, the position itself that I am not addressing? Yes, Deb.
Not addressing, a little bit more clarification. When you're talking about Dr. Blink's non-renewal, you're saying that, if I'm understanding it correctly, it's not really final until a year from this January. Okay, my other question is, if that is so, then why would not one of the principals have been given the same thing? Because of the fact that they decided that you do need to keep the curriculum director, and you've got to have somebody go. So you won't be able to do that because if you don't give them notice already now, then we cannot next year give them notice that they're going to be gone at the end of that time when Dr. Blink's contract is supposed to be final to be non-renewed. So basically, we're locked into 2 years for another administrator before we could have, if we have to eliminate an administrator, then it'd be 2 years before we could do that again.
If the contract rolls past the 31st of January, yes. The board must notify the administrator with a preliminary notice of non-renewal by the 31st of January. And that is the notice for the curriculum director position. Because the contracts, and again, contracts, the length of contracts are regulated, again, by state statute, which is in the statute that I'm referring to, 118.24. But they are generally 2 years in length with 1 year extensions that can be added on. And these are the timelines that need to be followed. So the notice that is given for the curriculum director position now is a preliminary notice. It stops the roll of another year to that contract. But let me back up to the comment that I made earlier about we may not be done with administrative reductions in the school district. I know that that is a continuing concern of the community. And because I know that administrative costs are high. But I think, and I've heard many times, and you have to forgive me because I'm still a relatively newcomer to this community, only been here 5 years, and I know many of you were born and raised here. And I know that people in the community frequently say, we did it before, we had 2 principals, we can do it again. We had a lot more students then, you're right. But I don't think we can be selective in what we would like back from the past. If you would like to go back to the days of 2 principals, then can we also go back to the days of a halftime PSLO officer, and a nearly full-time dean of students, and a half-time director of athletics, and a pool supervisor, and any number of ancillary personnel that we used to have in this district that had quasi-administrative roles. We also, my understanding is, the district was structured differently then. And in the old high school, I believe that grades 7 through 12 were held. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the elementary was K-6. We can't accommodate that kind of structure again. We could move 7th and 8th grade to the high school, and we could have a K-6 building over at the elementary middle school. That could happen. We have the capacity here, and I believe we have the capacity, well, obviously we have the capacity of the elementary middle school. Do I think that's in the best interest of students? No. You ask me outright, I would tell you no, because I happen to think that the middle school concept that we have for children today is outstanding, and that it meets the very unique needs of kids at that very difficult age. But that comes at a cost. That comes at a cost of having more personnel and having more administrators there as well. And the community is going to have to decide where its priorities lie. I don't think you can continue to ask the same thing of a diminishing administrative team. Since I've been here, there's been the loss of a PSLO officer, there's been the loss of a dean of students, now we're talking about the loss of a curriculum director. With the same structure in place, the people left cannot continue to do the same job in that structure. You know, my definition of insanity is asking for, you know, different results by doing the same thing over and over again. Something has to change. And those are the kinds of tough decisions as an administrative team we have already discussed to some degree, but ones that we will need to discuss more completely with this community, find out where your values lie, and quite frankly, what you can afford and what you're willing to pay for the educational opportunities of your children. Yes?
Okay, I had heard that the Peconic School District went from like a $500,000 deficit to like a $1.5 million surplus. And did Chilton implement what and they even hired more teachers? Did we do that in our district?
I don't know the financial story of Kaukauna, but I will tell you that when Governor Walker requested that state employees pay their portion of their Wisconsin retirement system benefits, and when he requested that employees pay 12% of their health care, that was given in the last contract by our collective bargaining agreement with our association. So we implemented those measures, but you need to understand that when Governor Walker made those sweeping comments about the state in general, our teachers were already paying 6%, our administrative team and other personnel were paying 7% of their health care benefits. While some districts, many districts, the employees paid 0% of their health care benefits. So when a district that had employees paying 0% went to a 12%, huge savings, more than what we had by going from 6 and 7% to 12%. So I think that may account for why you're hearing and seeing differences in why some districts had this huge windfall and other districts did not. Many districts also had huge retirements of some of their more senior staff members leaving in order to be able to recoup their retirement benefits. We did not see that last year. I don't think we had any. We have any retirements last year? One? Yes?
Along that same line, I kind of was trying to find out how some of these school districts were saving money. Because, you know, Appleton was $3 million, and it seemed like all of these school districts, it was like savings in insurance. And I guess I would just like to know, you know, if when you do your insurance, do you get, you know, different bids
necessarily teacher's health insurance. I think this is other insurance also.
We do annually look at our insurance costs. Last year, we did put out to bid our health care. We did recoup savings by not only employees taking 12% of that benefit, but also we redid the plan. So there was more savings to the district and more out-of-pocket costs to the employees. So all employees, I'm not just talking teachers, I'm talking all employees in the entire system paying higher deductibles, more out-of-pocket expenses. But yes, we take a look at our other insurance costs as well and look to be as competitive as possible. Yes, Mrs. Law?
I can talk like a teacher. Oh, now it's on. One of the other things regarding our health insurance, I presented this information to the Finance Committee, and I believe the newspaper had it in there probably about a year ago. I did an investigation, and you can find out from the state organization, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, what everyone's insurance costs are from other districts. And when I did that report, and that was from the 2009-10 year, so obviously it's dated, but it's not that far out of date. Chilton School District had the 9th lowest insurance plan of the 426 school districts. So if we were already one of the lowest insurance plans, and all of these others had, if our insurance plan for a year is $14,000 and theirs is $25,000, there's a big difference. And if they make a plan change, that's a huge difference, a huge savings for them. We were already being economical, so we didn't see that huge savings from an insurance change. Does that make sense?
I'm really glad you're asking these questions. These are great clarifying questions that everybody needs to hear and understand, so please do not hesitate. We do look at this, we take it very seriously, and we try and manage the financial resources of the district as efficiently as we possibly can. So our savings were not as great. Did we receive savings? Yes, we did. But the savings that we saw benefited us in balancing this school year. Now those savings have been taken, and now we move forward. We're not going to be able to recoup another Wisconsin Retirement System benefit because that's already been calculated into our budget. We're expecting that employees pay their portion. We're expecting that employees pay their 12% of their health care. So those costs have already been taken out of future budgets. So as we move forward, the deficit will continue to grow because those are not areas that we can look to recoup again, if that makes any sense to you. Yes?
You know, I think you have to realize that you're not the only one with problems as far as the budget. In business today, we have it every day of the week. And I think you also have to realize that, you know, even though you talk about insurance claims, you still probably have the most Cadillac insurance claims compared to business like we have. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I know one employee that we're serving at college. He's worked with us ever since we built the store. He's a great worker. He works 40+ hours a week. He makes $27,000 a year, $3,000 in benefits. And he comes to me and I say, Pat, if you go out and find a different job, I'll give you absolutely the greatest recommendation. Because he's a good worker, and I want to see him get better. You know when he comes back and tells me, he said, Mr. Nelson, I cannot find a different job that pays me $27,000 a year. And this kid is a hard worker. And he's got a good education. We also have 5 people working for us at college right today in Appleton on Westfield Boulevard that have college educations, 4-year degrees. One has a master's degree. She graduated from St. Edward's, a ton of money in student loans, graduated as a very good student. In fact, she was a student here at the high school. Great gal. After she graduated from high school, she went on to work at a bank in the Appleton area. Got laid off after a year and a half. Came back to us at Culver's said, I need a job so bad. Will you hire me? We said, we'd love to hire you, but you're overqualified for the job. And she said, I don't care, I need work. So I mean, you know, it's not so easy out there either.
I realize that. I want you to know that we held an employee meeting in this auditorium in November talking about wages specifically with our staff. And I did tell them there is no sympathy in the public sector these days for the sacrifices that public employees have made. I'm aware of that and I have communicated that. I have children of my own that are college graduates looking for jobs. So I know that it's difficult out there. I certainly can appreciate that and understand that. Yes, Deb?
You mentioned that the community, we're going to have to decide what we want and we're going to have to make some decisions. What about the survey? I thought that's what the survey was out there for, was to get that kind of input from the community.
I don't believe the survey asked about the restructure of our schools. I don't think the question was that specific. In general, I would say the survey results said, we believe you need to reduce administratively, and if you go on the website, we have the summary comments of the surveyor, and that was certainly the direction that the community gave us. But overall, we don't want you to touch programs and we don't want you to raise class size. That's kind of a tough order to take, because I can tell you, you could take every administrator in this room out. That's not going to address this deficit that we have, the problems that we see in front of us. In and of itself, it will not take care of that problem. So I appreciate your comments relative to the survey, but I don't believe that the survey addressed that. And in my preliminary discussions with people that have been in the community, certainly much longer than I have, it's my understanding that there was some discussion about 7th and 8th grade being in this building, and that was not well received by the community at the time this high school was built, which is not that old. I think we're in our 11th, 10th year. So that's, I wouldn't say the survey gave us direction in that regard. And these are my comments as a superintendent. That if you want to continue in that vein, then those are some of the kinds of things I think we need to consider. Anything else relative to administrative costs, salaries, contracts? Mr. Hintz, you mentioned Fund 80. DPI may have made recommendations, but I will tell you that if my understanding of Fund 80 is that it has to be funds that can be justified, that are open to the use of the community. So running the high school play at night, I couldn't justify taking those costs, those cleaning costs or heat and electricity costs and putting that in Fund 80, even though that's a nighttime activity. But we maintain, or try to, at our very best, have people fill out building usage forms so we know who's using our buildings, when and where, and how often. And we've started doing that now the last several years. And these facilities are used almost 24/7. But the budget that we are given to work with is really intended for the K-12 operations of the school district. So I believe that given the documentation that we have, that it would pass in an auditor's inspection that the costs that we are shifting to Fund 80 are for community use of these buildings. And as far as the middle school sports is concerned, that too would need to be community-based and community-wide, open to students that are homeschooled or privately schooled. I know that other school districts do this. So I have reason to believe that it would be appropriate in Fund 80.
So what you're saying is that all students 7th and 8th grade from
education classes, but sports programs.
So football,
Yes.
basketball, soccer,
Yes.
whatever, anything that has to do with,
Yes. Fund 80 requires that it has to be available to the entire community.
yes, I understand that, because I've done some research on it, to find out.
But yes, we understand that. And that has been discussed. It was brought up 2 years ago in this setting as well, and then it was taken back. We've tried to not add to Fund 80, because I'll be very honest with you, that's a tax shift.
So why would you not put the high school sports programs on there?
Because they're regulated by WIAA, and that's not allowed.
I mean, granted, it's only, $16 for a year for a tax, for a homeowner, but so we're already getting, I'm just gonna use my daughter as an example. Last year, my property tax bill, the school was 45% of the tax bill. This year, it was 46%. And granted, $16 isn't gonna make that big of a thing. But I don't see why a sports program for a 7th and 8th grade class should be added back on again to a property tax that we're already paying for the school. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me why sports is re-added. I mean, if the Booster Club wants to pay for 7th and 8th grade sports, they should be more than happy to do that.
That's something I suppose they can take up in a meeting, a recommendation that they could take up. Karen, you brought up about gaining more flexibility. Did I answer your questions as well? Is there anything I've missed?
I think you did.
Okay. There was comments made about the December meeting and then the listening sessions, and the meeting was made, the decision was made before this meeting. I think I addressed that. I can appreciate that the curriculum director position is an umbrella over a lot of initiatives that we have going on in the district right now. I would not disagree with that comment at all. And I too would not want us to lose continuity. So that how we would coordinate that in the absence of that position would be critical. I will tell you, Dr. Blake is not in the district at this time. Before she left, I did ask her and tell her that when she returns, we will start talking about her recommendations should this come to a final decision of what she would recommend. And we as an administrative team will also sit down and start talking about how might we divide some of these responsibilities and accomplish the work ahead of us. So, and Mr. Van Offeren, you had similar questions. Did I answer your questions? Okay. And I apologize if you felt that you were in any way misled by either myself or the board at the December meeting. I can assure you that was not the intent. But I also understand that community members do not always understand the amount of work and time and discussions that have already taken place, and I can see from your perspective why you may have thought that this was kind of a fast move shortly after I made the recommendations that that decision had taken place, but I can assure you that there have been very open and ongoing discussions through the fall with the entire team in both open and closed sessions of the Finance Committee. All members were invited, all administrative team members were invited to attend. Most of them chose to attend. Sometimes they could not for various reasons, but for the most part, there was very good representation. Yes, Mr. Nelson.
I guess I want to say one more thing. We have a rule at the golf course, and in all our businesses, that we don't get involved politically. We never have any signs up, and what their people's belief is their belief. And yet, I see your teachers on the street showing their political preference. And I don't think it's right. Getting recalled positions, I think that should be completely out of their realm. And I don't think there's any reason that your people that work for you should be out on the streets
understand your feelings, and I will respond to you by telling you that I have reinformed the staff that they are not to use their position in front of students and standing at lecterns and in their position of authority to in any way influence students and children regarding the political events that are happening in our community. And I'm very sensitive to that, and I have found that in the time that I've been here, when it has occurred, I can count on one hand the comments, the complaints I got from parents who will call me directly if it happens in the classroom. I will get calls, and I will address it if it happens in the classroom. It does not happen frequently. Again, in 5 years, I can count on one hand. So it is addressed very seriously. It also is addressed in the school building that those kinds of activities are not allowed, cannot take place on our school campuses. But I cannot control what citizens are able to do out on the public sidewalks. I appreciate your concern about that, but all I can tell you is the efforts that I have taken to request that we abide by the policies of the board here, not only in the classroom, but on district property.
Yeah, just make one comment on that. I think if you go back to last year to show the commitment of our teachers to the students, we did not have one teacher calling in sick to go down to Madison. So, I understand your point, Mr. Nelson, but also in the same sense, we've got some dedicated teachers here.
Before I sit down, any further comments, questions? I really want to feel like you had every opportunity to do so publicly with all of us here. I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Rickle.
I really have no other further comments, Larry. I just want to again thank you for all coming, sharing your opinions. They're all valid, and we all need to remember we have one common goal here, and that's the school district of Chilton. So, thank you.